The Boundary Waters is a collection of protected parks and lands straddling the Minnesota and Ontario border, an expanse of 2,484,422 acres of boreal wilderness. Our word wilderness traces its origin from the Old English wilderin, which signified where the durin, or beasts, live beyond the cultivated land. Relatively recent in human evolution did this dichotomy between fields and wilderness arise. Such distinction between undergrowth and crops would never have been for our hunter-gatherer ancestors. U.S. law expanded the concept in the Wilderness Act of 1964 to specifically categorize an area where the earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain, land retaining its primeval character and influence. Accommodating and incentivizing the transition of use for landscapes as the Superior National Forest. But what was that primeval character, and how has it been preserved? Ecologist Daniel B. Botkin describes undisturbed nature as a symphony whose harmonies arise from variation and change over every interval of time. Of all organisms, fungi are the organizing principle responsible for life as we know it on the terrestrial terrain, as their mycorrhizae supports root systems, defines structure, determining where and when a movement begins and ends. Their collaboration with cyanobacteria dictates key and sets tempo, the forest's foundation. Primeval action is at its least complex with a forest in recovery, providing the environment after disturbance for the most dramatic displays of the natural process. This historic red pine stand is a decade and a half since a catastrophic crown fire. Ecologists during the 1950s began finding evidence of the importance that fire had on forest succession in northern Minnesota. Heinzelman's 1973 groundbreaking work in fire history established the concept of landscape-scale shifting mosaics that resulted from tree establishment after fires. Suitable sites for pine reproduction require a ground or crown fire intense enough to expose soil by burning all litter and shrub and herb layers. Red pine is considered a fire-dependent as well as a shade-intolerant species. Maintained by frequent fires, arrays of red pine stands enhance the fine-scale heterogeneity of the Boundary Waters forest mosaic. Fire Atlas records of Superior Forest over the time period of 1935 to 2017 observed 1,090 ignitions with 92 fire perimeters. Lightning resulted in 49%, 532 of ignitions, while 51%, 558 were the result of humans. Due to an unattended campfire, a rolling black monster, as described by residents of the Gunflint, throwing off green clouds, white thunderheads, and a noise like a freight train, consumed 119 square miles. 17 days later, with the efforts of 700 firefighters and, mostly due to the weather conditions dying down, was the fire contained. Drought cycles are the dominant driver of fire activity that is non-human related. The previous year, not too far from this site, a lightning strike ignited what ultimately totaled 50 square miles, the largest fire at that time since 1894. Because the scour and scraping of glaciers exposed Precambrian granite, fires often consume accumulated soils, leaving behind barren rock again. Soils are slow developing and very thin atop the Laurentian Shield's sheets. Shallow are the roots of these trees. At the edge of lakes, visible is the depth of soil to substrate. Most soils of the coniferous forest belong to the order of inceptisols, immature soil that resembles its parent material of low-nutrient pine or fir needles. The order of alphasols, the soils of deciduous forests, are much more fertile due to the reabsorption of leaf litter. Even more fertile is the order of mosasols. When the fibrous and more abundant roots of grasses decompose, they produce vastly richer and more topsoil. Stretch imagination through time, when from glacial melt, sterile escarpments, eskers, mountains, and moraines remained, lifeless rocks as far as the eye can see. Borne on the swirling winds, tiny lichen soradia settled to earth, soon carpeting the new land and secreting organic acids, crumbling bedrock, making nooks and crannies for soil to collect. Similar are the conditions after a fire. Lichens are a composite life form, an alliance, mutualistic relationship between cyanobacteria living among the hyphae of species of fungi. Phylogenetically, lichens are classified with fungi instead of plants. 13,500 species of lichens have been identified and named, and from these partnered fungi grows the first plants of a forest. Forest development follows the process of succession, the effects and products of change on an ecosystem. Primary succession is the change of a previously unvegetated area. Secondary succession is the recovery of a forest after a disturbance, where biological legacy influences development. Ecologist Henry A. Gleason describes succession of a landscape as an extraordinarily mobile phenomenon, a complex process that is dictated by multiple causes that lead through multiple pathways, with no fixed endpoint. The first stage of secondary succession is the establishment of pioneer species, like flowers, sedges, and grasses. The secondary stage experiences the sprouting of shrubs and bushes. More substantial foods are attracting mammals. Small mammals like chipmunks and squirrels consume the fruit of the rosehip, while deer browse its leaves and branches. And with these larger animals comes additional assistance with forest making. Populations of decomposers are diversified as more and more animals with large home ranges and/or distant migratory patterns return to a recovering forest. As more and more pioneer and secondary plants appear, more nutrients are recycled through soil and offer more material for moisture retention. Trees will begin to spread, creating a young forest, an intermediate developmental stage, though not more red or white pines here. Superior's early successional species include aspen, birch, and jack pine, another fire-dependent species. Such rapid growth presents obstacles to the development of any mature stage of forest. If another fire comes through, all of this seasoned fuel would only magnify. Only small animals can travel through such density. Reduced nutrients, as each tree's canopy shrinks in competition with its neighbors. Waving off in the distance, a few old-growth red pines, trees old enough to have been sprouting during the founding of Tadoussac. Evolutionary adaptations like thick bark have allowed red pines to age from 200 up to 400 years. They can grow as tall as 200 feet. This historical representation of Superior's forest mosaic composition was derived from survey reports commissioned by the US government in the mid-1800s. Superior Forest's heterogeneity was a healthy mixture of 6 forest types. Compare present-day conditions as understood from surveys conducted between 1977 and 1983, the loss and reduction of pine forests, and the overwhelming proliferation of aspen birch forests reflects the impacts that modern use has had on the historic forest. Trophic structures of early successional forests are mostly made up of producers, sustaining simple food webs. A juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. Their numbers dropped during the mid-20th century. It is hypothesized that it was related to the use of DDT as an insecticide. During the same time period, bald eagle populations almost disappeared. DDT absorbed up through the food web interfered with the bird's metabolism of calcium. The sharp-shinned hawk breeds in North America's boreal forests in winters in Panama. Again, they're quite a rare sighting. Their numbers have been inexplicably, so far, declining. Humans have been a part of the Boundary Waters landscape since the last ice age. Paleo-Indian big game hunters first followed musk oxen and woolly mammoths throughout what was once tundra sometime between 12,000 to 8,000 years ago. As climate warmed and the forest established, woodland culture emerged. When the lightweight birch bark canoe replaced the range-limiting dugout technology. Between 1,000 to 400 years ago, with their first migration, the Dakota exerted cultural dominance over what was present-day Minnesota, except for the Cree who occupied the northeast and the Assiniboine of the northwest. By the 1600s, the Ojibwe had reached the limits of the Great Lakes, and, culminating in the realization of a myth, they stumbled upon where food, wild rice was interpreted as the prophesized, grows atop the water. Populations of the Great Lakes region were estimated between 60,000 to 117,000 people. However, introduction to North America of smallpox, measles, whooping cough, chickenpox, bubonic plague, typhus, malaria, diphtheria, amoebic dysentery, and influenza decreased these peoples by 50 to 95%. Which, with the fur traders dissipating operations, how couldn't such a vacancy of land not be obviously untrammeled by the illiterate and pre-telegraph settlers' imaginations? Human-augmented fire regimes differ from those by lightning in their frequency, seasonal timing, and spatial patterns. Fire scar samples collected from 414 some trees have produced a fire history that spans from 1489 to 2016. A network of red pine stands was maintained by fires burning as often as every 5 to 10 years through much of the 1700s and 1800s. Correlating with the height of Ojibwe cultural hegemony, Humans have been a member of this forest community so much so that its very structure, to a degree, seems forged by our unconscious efforts. The last 113 years or so have been anomalous. Heavy logging followed with subsequent fire exclusion and restriction of human habitation in Superior's red and white pine forests is transforming historical landscapes into the truly primeval.